In the mid-1990s, I originally received from Thoth Intelligence the information on the Andara crystals, including the name Andara. Part of my information on this crystal glass has been circulated widely by others through the years. The Andara crystals found on Lady Nellie's land in California, Thoth speaks of, are actually in another dimension of reality. The properties of these crystals, however, are present in some man-made glass that has been found on the current sacred land site. It is a highly unusual set of circumstances that brought this about, but when the man-made glass was buried as scrap on the land some time ago, the energy of the original crystals bled through the dimensions of time-space and anchored into the man-made glass, which we are now calling Andara crystal glass versus Andara crystal, which denotes the original other dimensional parent matrix. So all that Thoth imparts concerning this in regards to the energy dynamics of the Andara crystals also holds true, albeit to somewhat a lesser degree, for the Andara crystal glass. It is important to note that at that time in the 1990s, Thoth predicted to me that there would be other Andara crystal glass and even Andara crystals in the future. In other words, at the time it was only on Lady Nellie's land, but once that energy had been activated, it would start appearing in other glass and eventually in crystal, like volcanic glass or other trash glass, and then slowly it would merge with the certain crystals in the earth. And that is beginning to happen. Now, I have not heard reports of crystal being called Andara, but I do know that in other regions of the world, like the Indonesia area and places like that, there are some genuine frequency Andara energy coming out of certain volcanic glass. Now, this brings us to another thing, and that is anybody can claim that a piece of trash glass is an Andara. And there's a lot of fake Andara out there being sold for big prices on the web. That's a whole nother story. But I feel that the genuine pieces speak for themselves when you hold them, when you touch them, sometimes even when you look at them. And there are certain persons that I know have a special keen sense of that, and I feel that I do as well. I'm not saying that that sense can't be fooled, but I feel pretty confident when I sense an Andara. This video is about Andara Elixirs, and I'm going to get to that in just a moment. But before I do, I feel I need to tell you just a little bit more about what Thoth has to say concerning the Andara. Most of this information was given many years ago. From a Thothic transmission in 1995, Andara is the name we have chosen to identify the Prima Matra crystals coming off the California land owned by Nellie Thompson. These crystals, now he's speaking of the original ones and not the crystal glass, are composed primarily of Prima Matra heated to very high temperatures. We have related to you in the past that the first matter powders coming from this land were created by an interdimensional implosion. The land was originally seeded for Prima Matra by those we call the Time Walkers, in conjunction with high devas, mythologically depicted as unicorns. When the implosion occurred, the seed material was heated, not only to very high levels, but in a contained hyperfield, which is created by two or more dimensions touching. A hyperfield forms a no-time zone where linear laws of thermodynamics are warped and in some cases do not apply at all. It was within such a hyperfield that the Prima Matra powders and the Andara crystals were created, as well as some of the other types of crystals on the land, such as the opals and diamonds. Approximately 2,000 years after the interdimensional implosion, a Lemurian temple complex was raised on this site, the name of which was Andara, meaning light of beauty and perfection. The primary purpose of this complex was in working with the Prima Matra powders, crystals, and water on the land. One of the temples in this complex was dedicated to the ancient archetype known to the Egyptians as Sekhmet and to the Assyrians as Ishtar. While Andara was originally a Lemurian colony, those who participated in the Andara complex became their own race. By this we mean that through their purposeful interaction with the Prima Matra, they transmuted their crystalline DNA, becoming a highly futurized form of human being, even more developed in their light matrix than the Lemurians of that age. Thus, at this point in our discourse, we shall cease calling these colonists Lemurians and refer to them as Andarians. And so now, off script, the Prima Matra powders are the fine powders that Nellie found around these globs of glass that were infused with the original Prima Matra crystals. And these powders were also infused with the powders, the energies of the whole Andara frequency. So they have their own special quality, and I do talk about them some in the Mountain of the Moon Elixirs video, because it was the Prima Matra powders off of Lady Nellie's land that were used to create the original physical elixirs that are spoken about in that video. So let's go back to the 1990s a bit here. I believe it would have been 1994. And Lady Nellie had a friend named Carla, and we didn't know Carla, but she approached us sort of out of the blue. I say us, my former husband Simeon and I, and wanted from me a transmission from Thoth concerning the strange large globules of glass on Lady Nellie's land and the mysterious powders. Lady Nellie was trying to find out more about it from another source, because she was seeing that this substance, both of these things, was very healing for people, and people holding the glass would, have all kinds of incredible visions and experiences and healings. After I received this transmission, the requested transmission on the Andara crystal glass, a friend of Lady Nellie's told me that the glass had been taken to a gemologist who had declared it to be totally trash glass, nothing more. And then they took it to someone who has the spectrograph, I believe it's called, where you can look at frequencies in a substance. And they said that they'd never seen anything like the frequency that was in this trash glass. To me, this somewhat verified what Thoth had told me, that while the substance in question here was glass, it was carrying a very high frequency of the Andara crystals. Now I wish to read to you from another Thothic transmission a few years later, and this one was given extemporaneously to a gathering of mine when I was doing gatherings in the virtual world of Second Life. People would come in their avatar bodies from all over the world in these small gatherings to hear Thoth's transmissions. And so I simply typed them out as I received them right there in the moment. This wasn't some mediumship thing. I don't do that. But I just, as I received the information, I shared it in that moment. So these are some excerpts from his speaking on the Andara crystals. Firstly, the Andara crystals, in whatever matrix they may appear, the Andara are quite unique to Earth at this time. They contain phi geometries different from any other crystalline substance. They actually contain interdimensionally crystalline DNA holoaxial formations, or rather holoaxial formations. Holoaxial formations are a holographic micro moment of a DNA crystal, a picture, if you will, a snapshot. But this snapshot is a holograph, and as such, it is capable of transferring the living codes of that DNA crystal into the Andara crystal. This does not mean the Andara is alive, but that it has a memory of the holoaxial picture in 3D of a specific DNA crystal. DNA crystals, they are not something you could hold in your hand, even if you could see them. They are quantum force fields, crystalline in geometries they create as they spin from one leap to another through time. In the early 2000s, I was told by Thoth that some Andarians had returned into this dimension in the inner earth. More recently, I was shown that they were within a cavern area in the sacred hollow, not the cavern areas that connect to the surface of the planet, but in the sacred hollow, there are cavern areas in that region. And they were actually within the whole Seraphim, city of Seraphim area that I've spoken about many times on various videos, so I won't go into it right now. But it's a very sacred place, a unique place in the interior of the earth. And I asked, well, what are they doing now? And I received a rather nebulous answer. Obviously, it's not my time to know everything about that, or maybe it never will be, but they are working to create a frequency of the Andaran substance, the energy, that can be utilized in a new way, in a more advanced way, and also can be placed within various crystals and glass and other type of objects of that nature. It's something that they don't share with me yet in regard to all the dimensions of it, but I do know that they've already begun to place some of these frequencies in certain crystal objects and glass objects that didn't have that frequency in it before. It's not like one big free-for-all where they're just sending all this out into all these different crystals and whatever. That's not the way it's working. It's very specific at this time, a chosen project that only certain crystals, certain places, certain land areas are receiving this energy. In fact, recently, one of my crystal skulls was infused with this new frequency of Andara. And, I don't notice a huge difference in the skull because of this, but I was very specifically told that it had been infused with the Andara frequency for the purpose of our Quantum Logica interactive program that Thoth initiated. It's a blue obsidian. So now we begin to enter the part of the video that is really what this is all about, and that is the Andara Elixirs. My inner earth counterpart in the city of Seraphim, who is another aspect of my dimensional self. We all have dimensional selves, and this particular aspect is a female shaman who is in the city of Seraphim in the inner earth, and her name is Mikala. She was first brought to my attention when I was 4 years old, and I named my doll Mikala. I didn't know exactly how to say it or write it. Certainly couldn't write it. I couldn't write then. But anyway, so that's when she first kind of came into my consciousness. And then when I was in my early 20s, I heard her speak my name, and I was given that she was another aspect of myself. In any case, Mikala is a shaman in the city of Seraphim, and she works very closely with the Andarians. She's not an Andarian, but at times she works with them. And when I say works with them, I really don't know what that means. I just know and feel her connection to them and her connection to the Andarian crystals. And I believe that's the reason I was chosen by circumstance, but beyond circumstance, to be the one who received the original information on the Andarian crystals and the Andarian beings. What precipitated this video is my urging through her, that aspect of myself, to bring forth some visual connections to these frequencies that the Andarians are now calling to me, through her, the Andara Elixirs. I've chosen, through guidance, just a few of them. I'm sure many could be created, but for the purposes of this video, I've chosen these few to take into your field through the visual, the music, feeling the essence of it, literally experiencing it in the water of your body. As all these elixir frequencies that I've been presenting to you in several videos now, including this one, they are specific to connect to the water in the body. Yet the intelligence that is imprinted into water connects beyond just the physical body into the spiritual aspects of the being. We will now begin with the activation. Each elixir will be shown with 4 crystals first, 4 aspects of that crystal, and then you will see the 8 elixir bottles that were specifically designed to transmit aspects of the frequency of that elixir into your receptive being and into the field of the water in your body. As you immerse yourself into this process, simply enjoy the experience of seeing, visualizing these images and what it triggers in your deeper consciousness. thank you for accompanying me on this sacred journey with the Andara. There is quite a lot of information below this video. Included is a list of the Andara frequency seeds for each elixir.